See, hello, welcome. We are
We're
live.
live.
Did you see Substack just released you can go live on your like laptop now or computer?
It's wonderful. That's
I
wonderful. I can actually use my actual setup that I have.
I know, right? Next
Built
time,
in
next
here.
time. But yeah, today
Anyway,
we're on the phone.
we are on the phone. Everyone, welcome back to this episode of the podcast with Brandon Byrne and
And
me,
Tyler Kreiling.
Tyler Kreiling.
Kreiling.
Um,
I know it was
no worries. No one gets it right. I was shocked. I lost
Tyler
some
Kreiling.
headphones yesterday. And so I was kind of backtracking and I went to I had a doctor's appointment. So I went to where my doctor's appointment was, and the security guard actually got my name right for the first time
Oh,
ever.
hell yeah. But
I
yeah,
guess
today
not
should
ever, but
be
very small
ever.
ever.
But yeah, today should be a fun one because today we have two Geminis chatting on a Gemini full moon.
Yes, that's true. And I don't know what any of that means. So you're going to have to elaborate for us and
Yeah,
actually
totally.
explain that.
Well, yeah. So full moons are times of like peak energy or like heightened emotions. So I think you and I are also a little like taxed because like it is like it can bring a lot out, but it is also like tiring at the same time. So I think we might be feeling a bit of that. But Gemini especially is known for being extra chatty, communicative, and curious. Like I was kind of Gemini is very social that way. So having like a live in which we get to chat about stuff that's been going on, and it seems very fitting.
Nice. Well, that curiosity definitely saved my skin over the past 3 weeks.
What's
But
happened?
well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
I wrote up an article on it on the AI situation we're going to talk about in a second. To kind of pave the roadmap a little bit for everyone who's watching now and who will be watching later. Today we are going to be going over what 2026 will look like.
Hmm.
We have two very, I guess not different, but very interesting perspectives on the world, both Brandon and I. So I am very much analytical. I care about the data, the numbers, and specifically economics and geopolitics. And Brandon is definitely more of the astrological side
Yeah.
that seem to be working in tandem. Like when we've been talking on these lives over the past several months, they line up crazily. I
It's
don't know
super
enough
cool to
about it
compare.
or believe
It's
enough about it to go that these are connected, but they line
well,
up for sure.
I kind of see like astrology's like the macro on top of the macro. Like if you look at macroeconomics as like studying the economic movements of like the world, it's almost like the and yeah, astrology is just essentially the belief that like planetary movements affect human events and human happenings. So it's kind of like looking at that next I don't want to say dimension, but that next like layer of what is affecting
Right.
humanity and the world.
Which, to be fair, now this is something that I don't know how many people out there actually study or read up on modern portfolio theory or modern monetary theory. I've done it a little bit.
You
We're
and
going to be
me,
diving
yeah.
into that.
Only the nerds of the world, like you and I. Probably only
um,
the Geminis. No.
but it's very heavily psychology based, and it's an important element. And we've talked about this before. Nothing in this world exists in a vacuum. It
Mhm.
We do that when we as if we're the academics. The academics do that when they're modeling things because there's too many random factors to get a clear picture of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
At least for
It's
most
es-
of human history, it was that way.
it's essentially the law of relativity. I was kind of bringing this up in a well on like a online recently, and I was like, the law of relativity is like nothing exists in a vacuum. You're always like comparing
Yeah.
something to something else. And someone's like, that's not the law of relativity. Being all like scientific on me. I was trying to make a good point of like,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you know what a good day is if you've never experienced a bad day? So it's like you know what a good day is because you compare it with a bad day and vice versa with like
Right.
anything else. I use the example, I think it's a funny example, but I'm like, so I'm here in California, right? So like some people would say that like Australia is far, like a trip from California to Australia is far, but I'm like, well, if you compare like going all the way to Pluto, Australia is just like right around the corner.
Right.
So it's kind of, yeah, everything is relative.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, this is one of those things that, and this is not my background. It was my brother's background,
Oh, right.
but it is something I study off and on, because I'm a
Yeah.
huge nerd. Is um and the only reason we're bringing this up is because I was talking to someone about this recently about physics. Because it seems like everyone universally hated their physics class. It didn't matter if you were an
Really?
engineer or nurse or who, but physics is just hard. And I was like,
No.
well, yeah, part of the reason for that is physics only works in very constrained conditions. Newtonian physics only works if things are the right size and the right speed. If they get too big, too small, too fast, or too slow, or too hot, or too cold, or any of those factors, once you get to the edge cases of that, it gets extremely complicated.
Yeah.
And I think,
Einstein's theory of relativity kind of has these two sides to it. One is that like um when things are not accelerating, they have like a similar kind of, I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but they have a similar gravitational pull or something. But yeah, when you apply like something accelerating or changing speeds, it kind of breaks that model. So we
yep,
made this other like theory and go along with it.
right.
But yeah,
And no, yeah, 100%. And just back to the point of nothing exists in a vacuum. One of the things I've realized, to your point about astrology, it actually, whether it's like real in the sense of like scientifically verifiable or not, actually doesn't matter because it affects human
no,
psychology, and human psychology affects purchasing decisions.
yeah,
That's one of the
that's
few
an
things out
point.
of modern portfolio theory that I actually believe in because it is true. Um, why do people Here's a really great example. Why do people continue to go to the same coffee shop that they say they hate that's right next to their house instead of going one that they like that's 2 or 3 blocks down? And it's because of how we interpret that loss versus the gain that comes from that
The
is
convenience of like the closeness versus like
right,
the extra effort to go farther away.
right. And there's plenty of examples out there.
Interesting.
Um, but yeah, anyway, I my brain is shot, dude.
Yeah,
100%.
so
I am. So, why don't we get started? First off, thank you, Lighthouse Macro, for joining us. You joined a little while
indeed,
ago. I didn't forget about you. I saw you, and then we kind of got into stuff. But Brandon,
indeed,
why don't
welcome
you
Lighthouse Macro.
lead us out? Let's talk
Cool.
about kind of what you've been up to first, because we said we were going to start with kind
Oh
of
yeah, yeah,
doing some recap of what's been happening, because we didn't have a chance to sit down and digest together through November, and I think the
yeah.
rest of Blow Uptober either. So
Yeah, we haven't done a live in a little bit longer than we're used to. But yeah, so now getting to the point of the year we're at, starting to reflect on 2025, preparing for 2026. So that's kind of the general theme of what we're talking about today's live. Yeah, the recent stuff. November, yeah, I guess we'll get into November. So I before November, I was kind of looking at the astrology of November. It's like it just looks like this big like trauma therapy session. There's a lot of feelings going around, and this is kind of what happens every Scorpio season, but this particular Scorpio season was like particularly watery. There was yeah, I don't know, I don't know how astrologically took precise I need to get here, but there was just the water element was very activated throughout November, and water entails like feelings and emotions, but also like your intuition. So there was some sort of like spiritual sensitivities going along with water, the water element being so highlighted. But we also had a Mercury retrograde, so you have some of those frustrations of like things not working, and I probably have a more positive view on Mercury retrograde than most people. Like it is kind of disruptive, but it's like a necessary pause in order to like take things apart, see how it's working, how it's not working, and see how you can like put it back together so it can perform more optimally. But Mercury retrograde brings some of that vibe of like looking backwards, and so getting into like some of the deeper stuff or like looking back on like inner child wounds and doing a lot of healing. So there was a lot of support. So it was one of those therapy sessions where you like feel really good after, feel like lighter afterwards. But kind of also what we're talking about also.
we we lost your audio there.
Am I back? Or am I
You're
good
back.
now? Oh
You're
man.
back.
Yeah, my freaking AirPod like fell out. It'd be doing that. Um, but you heard most of the audio or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we lost you I don't even remember where we lost you. It was after you were talking about Mercury in retrograde of being that necessary reset to kind of kind of deal with stuff that has happened.
Yeah, so
Um,
the retrograde motion involves like looking backward. So I was saying like bringing up like inner child wounds and things of that nature. But it was a very supportive energy. So it's kind of one of those therapy sessions where you feel really good about it afterwards, where you feel like lighter. So thinking about like 2025 as a whole, um, the summer in particular, we did get kind of the preview of what 2026 and beyond is going to look like. We had Uranus enter into Gemini in July, and then it only stayed until November, so Uranus is back in Taurus. But it'll be back in April next year, and that'll where it'll stay until like 2033. So we got like, and as well as Neptune and Saturn entering Aries, but right now they're back in Pisces. The summer of 2025 kind of gave us this preview period of what 2026 and beyond will look like. But it was pretty like disorienting. Like it was like almost like too much too fast or like I keep seeing things of like kind of what broke in 2025 is going to be like what leads to your power in 2026. So it was
yeah.
disorienting, but it was also like getting us ready.
Mhm.
And so yeah, as we slowly start to get talk more about 2026.
Yeah.
Um I mean, yeah, these outer planets changing signs is kind of a rare occurrence, like doesn't happen very often. These slower moving planets obviously move slower. So, I mean, 2026, for a variety of reasons, is going to be a year where a lot of things change. Like, it's looking like the most dynamic year we've had since 2020. And dynamic meaning like a lot of moving parts. But yeah, we're going to see some big geopolitical shifts, just a lot about like how society works.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what your thoughts are on there. Yeah, pause for a second.
I think, and again, this goes back to my comment from earlier, and I've mentioned this on previous lives of like, I don't know how much I believe in astrology. Yeah, when I first learned about it, I had a big slap in the face of like, what, you don't believe in us, Tyler? Here's this. Like, Geminis are skeptical. Like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, checkmate. Okay.
It's funny. It's funny.
But it's often more on the right track than I think a lot of people would realize. There's a lot of stuff in the works. Just to kind of give a preview of some of the stuff that we've talked about,
Yeah,
that we've written about, that we're going to be seeing moving into the next year. We're going to see major shifts in the AI revolution, the AI arms race, as people call it.
definitely.
Specifically, I think, and this kind of to lean back into your comment about the whole Mercury in retrograde where everything's falling apart. Um,
Not
that
everything.
we've hit structural limits.
Yeah.
You know, here in the United States, we've hit the edge of our power grid for when it comes to this build out of AI, and we don't have the people to build more. Um, and we won't for a while. So you have that going on. You have China's massive blunder that right at the end, right at the end of Blow October, right? Kind of it the way that I was feeling about it moving through November and into December now is looking back is like we still had a lot of that hype energy from August, from like
Yeah.
July, August that was so slowly leaking out of the balloon. And then everything came apart in October. It's like all of a sudden, all the good feelings were gone. It's kind of like when you have a Thanksgiving with people that you really don't like, where everything just explodes. And China did that. You know, they had this master plan of how they were going to bring the Western economies to their knees by restricting access to rare earths and blackmailing the rest of the world. And it
Mhm.
totally blew up in their face. Um, so now we're dealing with the fallout of that. We have what seems like peace talks around Russia and the Ukraine.
Yeah,
It's
that war will probably end next year.
which I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. There's a bunch of factors going into that that it wouldn't be a good idea in my mind. Now, I'm not a geopolitical analyst, but it wouldn't be a good idea for that war to continue. from a humanitarian side, economically, resource wise, um, it wouldn't be a good idea. And I'm not the one calling the shots, so it's up to leadership. And it sounds like you in the United States who's brokering the deal to make that happen. But I'm right there with you. I feel like we went through the crash period, which was blow October and November, and now that we're getting out of it, I feel a change in the winds coming, and that's
Mhm.
like super like woo woo. There's not really much behind that other than just kind of my feelings and vibes. But I feel, based on what I've been listening to and what I've been watching, I feel a shift towards kind of a season of healing and coming at problems from a different angle. Um,
Absolutely.
so
And I
I think
think
you're more on the money than you think. Is the whole point?
thank you, thank you. And that's part of the message I was trying to tell people with like the water element being activated is like those kind of intuitive messages that you get, like definitely trust those around this time. And including on a Gemini full moon, being a Gemini, I would say it's a pretty good indicator to trust those kind of intuition things. But now there's actually another interesting indicator involving Russia in 2026. So one of the big things that happens in 2026 is Saturn's going to come together with Neptune in what we call a conjunction. This happens once every 36 years, just about. So last time we had a Saturn Neptune conjunction was actually around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And actually looking at all the past Saturn Neptune conjunctions, I don't know what it is, but Russia is always like heavily involved whenever Saturn and Neptune conjoin. It's kind of a interesting thing to see. But yeah, using the last example of the Berlin Wall falling, that's a strong indicator that like the war with Ukraine would end. That actually happens in February 2026. So yeah, it could be even you're talking about the peace talks. Yeah, it could be even like a little closer on the horizon. That could be 2 months away.
Yeah,
February being 2 months away, 2.5 months, pretty much. But
we'll see.
um, indeed, indeed.
Sorry to jump in there, but just about your comment there, I wonder, and I don't know this for sure. This is qualitative as all hell, but over the past since the summer, um, I've been learning more about Sino-Russian history. So it's China, Russia, all the little countries that no longer exist that were between them. Um, And, maybe it's that meme of as guys get older, they fall into the camp of power tools, barbecue, or World War II, or all the above. But
It's funny.
one of the things I've noticed, and I can't say this for sure because I haven't done enough research, but kind of the vibe that I'm getting from what I have read so far is Russia bears a lot of similarities to, funny enough, Bitcoin, where there's no circuit breakers, there's no breaks. Um, And maybe it's because of the geography that they're in, where the resources are, um, the
Feel
culture that's been
disconnected from
driven
the
from
rest of
where
the
we
world.
live. It's either 100% or zero. It seems to be what happens with Russian history, going all the way back to the czars, probably all the way back to Catherine the Great. Um, and so it doesn't surprise me that if these big cycles are what naturally occur in human psychology and interacts with the planets and all that stuff. It makes sense to me that a country like Russia would be one of the ones where you'd see it first,
Hmm. Yeah, it's
simply
interesting.
because of how they're structured.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How they're structured, do you mean like, how do you mean? Like disconnected from the rest of the world in a sense, or?
Well, here's where I'm building that off. These are the biggest um, data points that I'm using for that. First off, um, Russia has never Russia has always had an extractive economy. It's always been that way.
Hmm.
It's always been the weak shall fear the strong, going
Yeah.
all the way back as far as I can tell. So that's the first part. Um, in those kind of economies, you have to do a lot of PR and narrative juggling in order to keep people from rioting because
Yeah,
there's a
like
lot more people at the
propaganda.
bottom than people at the top. Um,
Yes, that actually makes sense with Saturn and Neptune. If I can expand on that a little bit, like Neptune is kind of the planet of like illusion, fantasy, imagination,
Mm,
and kind of can include like that propaganda theme.
right,
But Saturn's very much kind of the opposite. It's kind of the planet of like reality and like
right.
as well as like limits, restrictions, responsibility. But like Saturn and Neptune coming together is kind of like dis disillusioning all these things that we kind of that like aren't really real in a propaganda sense. I was thinking about this recently. I mean, just kind of talking about like the news of the week in a more domestic context. Like, it's funny seeing Trump when the other day he said like affordability is a Democrat scam when he basically like ran on the platform of like I'm gonna fix the cost of living crisis. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of been an ongoing trend that like a lot of people that voted for Trump for that reason of like he'll make the economy better, he'll help you with like, financial struggles around the country. Like that illusion is like for the most part gone away. And that's kind of been this buildup of as Saturn's been getting closer to Neptune, it is kind of like this it's almost like an awakening, like of in a sense of like not falling for the bullshit anymore.
Well, there has been a lot of that, and just for everyone at home, Trump's not the only one that's done that.
Yeah. Yeah,
He
politicians make claims and then don't follow through.
right. Well, he's in the unique position of being a populist in a very populist, unfriendly culture.
Hmm.
Um, that's been my biggest takeaway because I wrote back in the first part of 2025 um, of a potential populist revolution on the horizon across the globe. You
Uh-huh.
know, Trump was
Populist meaning
elected.
populist meaning what?
Populists, it's a political type. It's government for the people. It's it's hard for me to pin down because I'm not a political scientist because there's different types of populists. For example, Trump is a conservative populist. In the sense where he leans more conservatively, but he's a populist. He's not a
Uh-huh.
Republican. Um, Javier Milei is a
Oh yeah.
populist, but he's also an anarchist and a libertarian, right? He is, get rid of all this government stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have left wing populists as well. People like can't remember his name, but the leader of the opposition party in France under Emmanuel Macron is a
Hmm.
hardcore left wing populist,
Fascinating.
where it's it seems to always fall down to these characteristics. Populists, they're not fans of the kayfabe that happens in politics. They speak their mind, they act on their mind. They appear to be a little bit more they appear to like executive orders more than the typical democratic process that we've seen in the 2020s world where things just take
Interesting.
forever. They like to move
Yeah.
quickly. They don't, which in some sense is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, I remember Nietzsche calling, I don't remember because I didn't meet the guy, but I read Nietzsche saying that populism is the politics of the angry. And that's very much been a trend with a lot of people, the AFDP, Trump, all these different leaders. They're leaning on public anger
Which there's a lot
and
of.
they're using that as a springboard to get these elections where they sweep the opposition out of the way so they can actually get something done. And that's one of the things that I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not like a hardcore MAGA fan by any means, but to his credit, he's trying to take on the largest bureaucratic machine on the planet. And that's what these populists fight against. And it's why everyone
Hmm.
hates them. It's because of those characteristics. I wish I could say that I was more shocked that we haven't seen a return to the cost of living.
You you want to say you're shocked that we haven't seen a return to the
Yeah,
cost of living? Like a
but
lowering of the cost of living?
I'm not shocked that we haven't lowered it.
I don't think it's practically impossible to lower it. I mean, just from my view of like inflation's always a thing, and so the cost of living is always going up because inflation is always a thing. It's kind of like I don't know if we've talked about like inflation versus deflation, but like inflation is literally just like inflating prices. Deflation is like lowering prices, but it's just because of how like our economic structure is set up, the system is kind of incompatible with deflation. So like if you think about like technology being naturally deflationary, like iPhones get cheaper over time because the
Mhm.
technology gets more efficient and like computers and other like
Mhm.
the technology is naturally deflationary. It gets cheaper over time. But most everything else is inflationary and that's partially kind of how the system works. Like they aim for 2% inflation because like when they're in deflation, it normally manifests in like a recession or a depression or something like that. So it's not like deflation is bad, it just doesn't work with the current system.
It doesn't work in a system where you continuously roll over your debt to
Exactly.
support your balance sheets.
Yeah.
Is what it breaks down to. And this is not just a country thing. We have a lot of companies that do the same thing.
No,
This
no.
is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is MicroStrategy's problem right now.
What's their problem?
Um, I I guess a little bit of background. MicroStrategy is
Mhm.
the Bitcoin reserve company. A lot of Bitcoin hardliners were super stoked that it happened, that they started buying Bitcoin back in, what was it, 2020.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it really
It's one
drove
of
a
the
lot of price movement in their stock. The
yeah.
price of
So now a
Bitcoin was
lot of
going
people
up.
will buy MicroStrategy as like a proxy for Bitcoin.
Yes. Yes. But and well, hypothetically, I believe you could make a business model around that where you could, for example, have your Bitcoin reserve and then lend against it, make money that way. There's things you could do to not only grow from capital gains, but also grow from profit, which is the more important number for the stock market. Is where's
Right,
the
right.
money? Bitcoin's great, but dollars spent. Um, and the problem is he didn't do that. Instead, what he did, and I'm still a little fuzzy on what his ultimate goal with the Bitcoin Reserve Company is, because it can't just be to hodl forever,
It somewhat
you know.
is.
Which is, I think, his plan right now. But what
Pretty
he's
much.
done is he's taken out a whole bunch, or borrowed a whole bunch of money in the form of bonds,
Yeah.
and he made all those bonds convertible
Yeah.
at insanely high strike prices. When everything was on the up and up through 2025 and 2024, that was an easy sell. You go to a lender, say, "Hey, here's our stock price. It keeps going up. We're backed by Bitcoin. People love it. We're going to keep
Yeah.
issuing stock. People keep buying it. Give us however much money, and in return, you'll get this amount of stock at this strike price." And then he pushed it way above where it currently is, hoping that they would never call their cash.
Hmm.
And they haven't yet, but they could. Bitcoin blinked, and this goes back to the deflationary thing. If it had been a situation where he had a Bitcoin reserve and then another way to make cash from that reserve or another side business, so that was part of the model, not the whole model.
Yeah. Well, my
And
strategy itself was like a software company.
right, right, exactly. Doing business intelligence software, I think, is what it
Yeah,
was.
something like that.
Um, and specifically, if he hadn't done all this financial engineering on top of it,
Yeah.
he would have been fine. The Bitcoin price would have gone down, the stock price would have plummeted, but it would have recovered, and probably
Yeah.
over the long term, it would have kept going up.
Yeah. He essentially used like leverage, like taking out debt and loans
Hmm.
to buy Bitcoin, essentially,
Yes.
which like the thought process is like if you can get debt at like, 5% interest rate or whatever, and
Right.
Bitcoin appreciates more than that, you come out on top.
Yes.
Which I don't think
And
he's still that worried about because he also looks at Bitcoin as like a super long term. He doesn't care if it goes down over the course of like a year or two. But yeah, you keep going.
no, which is the right way to look at it in my mind, especially from again this case of where cryptocurrency's only been around for 2 decades, and the equity markets have been around for 150 years or longer. These things
Yeah,
take
yeah,
time.
exactly. So still kind of some
Yeah.
acclimating to do.
The
But wait, you mentioned,
lenders do
yeah,
not feel the same way.
no, no, they're a
You
little
know,
more jumpy with their money.
if you're a bank or a private credit firm, you want your money at maturation. That's when you want it. You're not in it for 10 or 30 years down the road or
Right,
infinitely. You're in it for the length of the contract. That is your business model, right? That's
right.
how they think. And
But
sure,
it's
some of
kind
them
of
go on.
into my kind of what I was talking about of like it's just kind of how the system works. So it's kind of they've just been playing this game for a long time. Uh, when you were talking about you mentioned this is kind of like a global thing. Do you
Mhm.
remember having that line? I think back to like well just the Bretton Woods system and how the financial system has essentially operated like this on a global scale since the Bretton Woods system, but especially since we left the gold standard in the 70s.
Mhm.
But you're talking about 2026. We're kind of in the middle of like some big changes
Yeah.
to the system as well. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And by the way, I think you and I have talked about this before, but just to add a caveat to that, this has always been a thing. This idea of fractional banking, making money off of multiplying your supply. The goldsmiths were doing this in the 1400s. It was illegal, so they had to be careful about it, but they were doing it.
mm,
And really, the only difference is back then, the supply of gold was your hard stop. You could only overexert so much. In a fiat system, it's a little bit more opaque. It's more nebulous. It's harder to track down. So, and it's how you get
exactly.
situations like the China real estate bubble. Is you have to get the way that I was describing this to my wife because I'm a not a cash business guy, but I'm a cash guy. I like seeing profit. I like seeing profit growth, margin, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Most of humanity doesn't have the complex financial knowledge to pull off these kind of schemes is the wrong word, but to do something like we've done with the Bretton Woods system takes some of the smartest people on the planet, but even then they can't see the future, you
Well,
know?
I guess what we're talking about is trying to find solutions to current problems. Like the Bretton Woods system was kind of the best solution to the problem at the time. So if we kind of relate it to the problem of now, like talking about like the cost of living crisis, too much debt, like being practically getting like waterlogged with all this debt, like is that kind of what you're talking about of we don't have
Yes.
the minds to find the solutions to our current problems?
Well, we do now. What I was trying to get at with this situation of like, oh, we'll make a fiat system and everyone will just use dollars. It'll be backed by the faith of the US government, which isn't totally true. It's backed by the fact that they can tax the largest consumer base and
Yeah.
all these
And
other
a
things, right?
military, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. But
All this stuff,
essentially,
right?
backed by the United States government, and
Yeah.
that gives the United States government a lot of like power and
Mm.
authority.
Right. But to put this in perspective, I'm saying like the smartest people were the ones that designed this. Central bankers are PhDs, pretty much all of them. Um, and when you're at that level, when you have that understanding of a certain field, of a certain scope, you can do things that other people couldn't do. Like you and I probably couldn't design a better currency system. I know my brother and I have debated back and
Bitcoin.
forth on what that would look like.
I
But
just think of Bitcoin. It's already been designed. Replace Bitcoin with dollars, and a lot of problems get solved.
um
That's my thought process, or at least part of it. Part of
we
the overall picture.
right. We can't see the future either. And
Right,
so
right,
problems will appear further down the road that we didn't plan
right,
for.
right.
And I think a lot of this, like debt rollover after debt rollover after debt rollover, was problems that the Bretton Woods designers didn't plan for or they
No,
didn't see on the horizon.
no, that's kind of, yeah, the nature of things. Nothing stays the same. And so solutions to problems create new problems, and thus you need to find new solutions, which, yes, of
Right,
course, create more problems down the line. But
right.
it's like you need to solve the highest priority problem now. The best solution for it, whether it causes problems later, is still worth doing and like working towards.
Mhm. No, yeah, 100%. And
And it's kind of just following like trends. I guess you kind of like project where the future could go. So that's kind of like the better tools we have for like forecast and like projections and things like that. And so that's why I've always looked at like, the trend of inflation, like the cost of living crisis. The cost of living is always going up. So you can kind of see, and it's just how debt works. It's like buy now, pay later. Well, it's like we're kind of paying for it now. Like the debt that society has is essentially like still paying off things that were bought in the past. And that's why like, Gen Z is like the first generation that is like worse off than their parents because, we've been kind of compounding this 2% inflation. I mean, 2% when it's on the low end to in the range of like 2 and higher for like 50 years now. And so you kind of project that like 50 years down the line. It's not hard to see how we got here, but you also can like start to see how the cost of living crisis is really having a lot of adverse effects on humanity, the public. Like,
Mhm.
um, it's just more common to have like debt than it is to not have debt, and that
Right.
comes with all kinds of like stress, like not feeling like you really have like the freedom to live your life the way you want. So many other stress factors along with that. Um, so you can kind of tell that like the trend is still going. Like
Mhm.
inflation is still around, meaning the cost of living will continue to rise. So it's like
Right.
we're kind of at a breaking point or like a crossroads in terms of like what people can bear, or at least that's kind of the way I see it. I don't know if you see it the same way.
Um, in part,
Okay. Yeah.
in part. And I think this goes back to and I was gonna interject this about your comment with
Sure.
the way the system's built, because the system is built that way. Well, the system was built to allow for a better flow of capital in a world where everyone played by the rules. Was the original thought of the designers coming out of World War II, right? There were plenty of there are plenty of players who abused that. Here's a very good example. Back to 2008, I just learned about this from Steve Eisman himself. He did a lecture at North Carolina University, and this is one of the things he brought up. And there's plenty of things that happened in 2008 that show this clearly, that it's like, okay, no, everyone was looking the other way.
Very much so.
You know, they weren't doing the due diligence, because why would you when everybody's making so much money, right?
Yeah. You ever see The
But
Big Short?
exactly. And I made
Yeah.
the comment in my article. It's like the reason why Michael Burry made so much money was because he did all the due diligence, not just some of it.
Exactly.
Not He didn't ignore it. He didn't do just some of it. He did all of it. He read every page.
Yeah. And he
Um,
could see just how like fucked everything was.
right. And this is what Steve Eisman brought up, where even up to the bank level, he was explaining how these collateralized debt obligations, all these mortgages in a box.
Mhm.
He said what the banks would do, because he was working with the banks at the time, is instead of going through all 1,000 pages of mortgages, they would take a sample, a statistically significant sample, which it's fair. It's statistically solid that you don't need to look at all of them. You can just look at a sample and get a basic
Yeah.
idea. But with how much variation was in those bonds, they probably should have looked at a much larger sample. So they'd look at
Mhm.
like 30% or whatever, 50, no, not even 50, like 30% of the bonds. They'd take a look at them. They'd hand them their analysts, say, what does this look like? And if they looked like they were too risky, they'd hand them back to the brokers and say, we don't want these anymore. Give us some other ones. But what Steve Eisman was upset about is like they didn't look at the rest once they threw out that 30%. They threw out that
Mhm.
30% and said, okay, we're hunky dory. It was a failure of due diligence, as well as fraud, as well as reach for yield, and all those other things happening in the same area. But they should have done their due diligence. When I talk about being some
Absolutely.
of the smartest people in the financial world, these, interest rate traders and these interest rate analysts are some of the best. They should have
100%.
been smart enough to know that, or they did and
100%.
they looked the other way.
So, what do you think not enough people are doing their due diligence on right now? Or I know I kind of talk about like the cost of living crisis and like
Yeah.
debt and inflation as like, the priority problems. Do you kind of
Right.
see that as well? Or like what are your kind of like main concerns, problems of the world or
Um, I think you're on the money with that one. The K-shaped economy is looking less healthy than ever in my mind.
ah yes.
I guess that's too extreme of a term. It's looking really unhealthy.
Yeah.
Um,
A big
con-
divergence happening.
Connected to the debt problem, I think one of the big places where due diligence is not being done is the private credit market and the private equity market. Uh, I'm only looking at it now because I'm doing this I'm doing this project with the Global Council on Crypto Taxation, I think is their term, and I'm learning about tokenization, and I'm reading the research, and I'm talking to people who are in this industry, specifically with the goal of tokenizing private credit, private
Hmm.
equity, private real estate, and bringing liquidity into that space where there wasn't any before. But
Yeah, really
most of
interesting.
these defaults that we've talked about in the past, it's a due diligence problem. They should have gone in and been like, yeah, it's hard because these are custom contracts and you don't really know what you're getting, especially if you're buying a group of these contracts from an actual lender as like an asset backed security. But they should have been smart enough to go that step down and been like, okay, we bought these from this bank. You go, hey, bank, who'd you lend this money to? And
Yeah.
sign an NDA. Like it doesn't have to be public information, but sign an NDA, go look at the borrower. What's the borrower's history? That could have solved a lot of these. That could have solved the Carriox capital question for sure if some of these lenders like KKR and Blue Owl and all this stuff had gone to Carriox Capital and been like, you handed us all of these receipts and all of these notices saying people were going to pay you. Let's call them. We have their phone number.
Yeah.
Let's call them. Oh, you never heard of them before? That could be solved, and it's kind of the same. And I guess to connect to what we're going to be finishing off this video with, one of the big factors I see moving forward is people are going to get a lot more critical when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I
that makes
think
sense.
I think the vibe train of everyone's going to invest in AI, everything's going to be hunky dory, we're all going to get rich. I think that's devolving very rapidly. People are
I'd
still going
agree.
to make money. Millionaires, tons of millionaires and billionaires are going to be made from AI.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I
But
don't I don't look at AI as dissimilar from like the internet. So I kind of use like how the internet, like kind of the dot-com bubble, but kind of how the internet changed a lot of things, made a lot of money, opened up a
Mhm.
lot of opportunities, things like that. But at the same time, yeah, it's also not everything that has to do with society. I mean,
Right.
internet touches every industry, like AI touches every industry.
Yeah.
So it like affects things. But in terms of what you're talking about, yeah, what are we talking about in terms of like the vibe switching?
So I feel the vibe, and I texted you about this before. So we had this like vibe roller coaster where it was this huge run up in hype. Where everyone's like, we're all going to get rich. I saw it
Yeah,
everywhere. It wasn't just
in the
AI, it
summer.
was crypto, it was gold, it was options. There were literally people on Twitter before the big stock crash that were telling me, I've made all this money, but I don't actually hold any stocks. I just do options trading. And I'm like, that is so risky.
Yeah,
That's insane.
it
It's gambling.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, there's was this like July, September,
Yeah.
August, September.
Nobody
Yeah,
rocked the boat. We're all having fun. We're all going to make a lot of money. And then crap hit the fan in October and it kept hitting the
yeah,
fan in November. And so now we're going into this period of, I think I said healing or like healthy, return to
yeah,
healthy vibes,
yeah,
where people are going to be a little bit more self aware and they're going to be
absolutely.
a little bit more interested in going, okay, who am I actually giving my money to? who am I giving my energy to? What things am I spending my resources on? Is this something that I actually want to spend my resources on? Hopefully.
100%.
That's my hope.
No, I'd agree. I'd agree. I kind of well, yeah, just talking about like the timeline of it all. Like like it was Uranus went into Gemini in July, and then what like the summer of 2025 we had these preview of like all this newness, and that's what was kind of like exciting about stuff,
Mhm.
including like AI and tech stuff. But yeah, then all those planets went retrograde and went back into their old signs. So that's kind of where I see like that kind of balloon popping.
Yeah.
Um it like it's almost like a like ebb and flow of like a tide. Like it is like the when you're on like one side, it's like you can be it feels very exciting and like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
never gonna like lose money ever again. But
Right.
what's Warren Buffett's famous saying? The tide rolls in and you see you swimming naked.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of always think of things in terms of like a cycle. And so when you think the current moment will never end, like everything ends. There's always an ebb and flow to everything. But thinking about like the sun cycle and like the annuals thing, it's like um fall gives way to winter, but spring and summer will come back next year. So it's like summer ends, but follow the cycle, like you'll come back around. So I mean, so I don't see like the ending of anything. The ending of anything is the beginning of something else. But
Right.
looking at a cycle, it always comes back. Anyways, getting with 2026. Like we are getting it was a preview 2025 the summer was a preview period of things to come. So I do see some of that coming back. But it's kind of like the winter, yeah, we're a little more like calm before the storm almost, like
Mhm.
getting rooted in how we felt about 2025 to prepare for a better 2026. So when you say, especially in terms of like auditing, like your energy, your various forms of currency, like it's not only your money, but it is like your time and your energy. Like, have I devoted my various currencies in the way that I wanted? Not only in
Yeah.
a way that made me feel good, but some people that think about like making the world a better place. Like, did I use my currencies to affect the world positively as well as
Right.
myself and my own life and my loved ones?
Right.
Is that kind of the vibe you're talking about?
No, yeah, 100%, 100%. And there's a couple things that are telling me that that's where we're headed. It's not just the credit defaults were a big one. Um, Underneath that, though, you're starting to see behavior in the private credit market that suggests that lenders are getting nervous, like they're buying swaps. Um, a lot of these big bankers are talking to each other, going like, "Oh, maybe we should sit down with the Fed and plan for what happens if all of our liquidity disappears." So stuff like that's happening in the background, and
Mm,
it's all very hush hush. They're not talking about it, but
makes sense.
it extends past that. Like now, when I turn on a podcast about AI investing, all of the big economists and investors are going like, well, AI is not going to take everybody's job. Like everyone, calm down.
Yeah.
They went we went too far,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
we went too far culturally as well. Um,
Yeah.
I've seen a massive shift away from the grind set.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about in terms of like
Yeah,
energy, like our energy management.
yeah,
Like well, I think some of the things I'm seeing are part of dropping the illusion of like the 9 to 5 or starting to become less romanticized with that sort of system of work.
mm,
But there's yeah, a lot that's kind of led to like so much burnout and yeah, it was really just a small piece of all that. It was kind of just like exposing these things that were not working well, like under the hood, if you will, of
yeah,
like the economy. And that's all of us as like workers almost realizing that like it's not even like a burnout from too much work. It's just like I guess you can think about it in a work life balance, but it's like
mm,
we should be able to live in a society where we can work less and earn more. At least that's kind of like the thought.
yeah. And we may be headed that way on a long term basis.
I'd
I
agree. I'm
I
very
think it
optimistic long
was
term.
what was it, BlackRock? I think it was BlackRock that I was listening to this morning saying that in order to match AI demand by 2030, we're going to need 500,000 skilled energy workers. So we're going to need 500 skilled craftsmen who can build power lines, who can build substations, who can build power plants. We don't have that. And so it mirrors, or it doesn't mirror, but it rhymes for me with the creation of the guilds after the Black Death that led to the Industrial Revolution in the first place, where all of a sudden you have a shortage of very key workers. And because of that, and power's not the only one, there's a couple other industries that are
Yeah.
short on workers. Those workers can now demand higher pay.
Yeah.
And now the world has to start complying with their demands because they're the failure point.
100%. I know it's interesting thinking about, well, part of what we're talking about with like the novelty of AI, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of explains part of like the horrid like job market of current. Like it's partially what we're talking about in terms of like AI is so new, you're thinking about like, oh, that way it's going to change everything.
Right.
But it is almost romanticizing it. Now that we've sat with it for about 3 years at this point, we have a much more realistic understanding of what AI can and can't do. Um, as well as how it will and will change things. Kind of just what you're talking about of like
Right.
the energy workers that we will be lacking. It's like now we're still kind of like after the period of gathering what will change. We have a better understanding like what we will need in
Right.
terms of the job market. But no, I forgot what else I was gonna say. Something else.
No, 100% agreed. And by the way, for everyone who's watching this later, it always comes across like I'm hating on AI. I don't. It'll change the world. The thing is, this is the case with new technologies, with new anything. You get these intellectual cults that build around these new things. And they're always going to be the same. You'll always have people who will say that, we're only one step away from mass adoption in crypto. You will always have
Yeah.
a group of people who will say, oh, well, you know, building these multi-billion dollar real estate portfolios on on tons of leverage is still the way to make money. They will always exist. The AI cult will always exist, and they will continue to preach the fact that, the technology is too new and we haven't seen what it's going to do yet, and we're going to need universal basic income and all like that group will
Yeah.
always exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's not a bad thing. Like people are allowed to believe what they want to believe, and
Totally.
they have good points, but
Totally.
they
It can,
also don't see the whole picture.
right. I think another thing that like kind of AI among other things has probably exposed this year has been thinking about like what AI can and can't do. Like I've seen the trend of like just being more human, like especially being like kind of like content, like AI making more content. It's like now there's so much demand or hunger for like relating to like fellow humans. I mean, that's especially a trend with like something of the loneliness epidemic too, and how hard like relationships have been in the modern age. But that's been a kind of cool, and it's kind of I think that's kind of highlighted some of the lack of our basic needs that have not been met. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know if that's part of what you're talking about in terms of feeling low energy now or recently.
Mine's spent energy. It's
Yeah.
less about like I have been very tired recently with some things that we're dealing with personally, but for me it was spent energy. I spent a lot of energy over the past 3 weeks trying to make sense of the AI investment nonsense.
Hmm.
Um
Especially
and
when it's like, if we're devoting all this money, it's like, this is like what we want the world to look like. When it's like, do we want the world to be ran by like AI and do everything, or do we want to kind of put some money in back, like, the human spirit and like kind of just like raw connection, as well as like other things that feel very human that highlight ways that humans' basic needs haven't been being met lately, recently. Like, is that more where we want to like dedicate our resources to? Is
yeah.
that kind of some of the thought process?
That's the feeling I get is it's time for all of us to take a step back and like you said do an audit
Reassess
of
your values.
ourselves,
Because
of our lives,
because as an investor, like I kind of love that. philosophy of like being a conscious investor. Like it's like you vote with your dollar. Like it's like you investing in something means like you support this. And even with like groceries and everything else you spend your money on. So it's like if you look at what you invest in as like how you want the world to change, there could be other places to dedicate your money than AI.
Right. Right. I think I am out of time for tonight,
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
at the clock. But
Yeah, good chat.
um plug your stuff. What can people see from you moving forward here?
Yeah, I'm pretty much diving diving headfirst into astrology and stuff. So I've started giving readings a few months ago. Now I have yeah, open books for giving readings. Primarily kind of working in that like healing thing. Just 2025 exposed so many weird stuff. So it's like helping people get kind of reconnected, learn how to like align with their soul's purpose and heal ourselves to heal the world in a kind of way. But that's kind of where I'm at currently giving astrology readings. And yeah, working with some other stuff for 2026 and
Nice.
things to be announced, released soon.
Sweet. Perfect.
What
Well,
about you?
um BDIC is going live soon for people who are interested. Tomorrow, I will be doing a live video with James McCarthy, the COO of BDIC Insurance's tokenization business.
Say,
Very smart guy. He's been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. So that'll be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about
sounds like it.
why you can't sell your tokens on the secondary market. He doesn't know that yet, but I'm going to be asking him about that, the Aspen Ridge case. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be diving into AI moving into next week. I'm going to start writing some articles that I feel like are necessary, or some skills that are necessary for the world, for the post AI world. So that will
Ooh,
be
yeah.
coming as well.
Sounds super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, it's funny. We are kind of like mirroring each other because yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be like 2026 is like gonna be a really big year. So I'll be talking about like how what we can expect from that. But yeah, a lot of it is kind of like AI and this sort of like revolution, how things are moving forward. AI and things plays a big part of how the year will shape out. But
Sure.
it'll be fun.
For sure. Sweet. Well, thank you, Brandon, for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler.
Late
Always a
in the evening
pleasure.
now. Yeah. We'll be talking soon.
Happy December. Happy holidays. And
Hey,
maybe we'll
to
talk
you
again
as well.
soon.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, the Money Nomad, Wealth and Wisdom. Subscribe to us both, and we will see you guys next time.
Many blessings. Take care.
Bye bye.